After the crash, entrepreneur Leonard Doyle regained consciousness, but pretended he hadn't. Lying perfectly still in the massive bed of his Westchester, New York mansion, he kept his eyes half closed, listening to every sound around him. His wife, Isabella, drifted in and out of the room, showing no trace of genuine emotion. She spoke on the phone in a soft, intimate tone, laughing quietly, ignoring the two little kids who stood crying in the doorway. Leonard stayed motionless, but he heard every word, until the housekeeper, Susan, stepped inside. Susan always adjusted his blanket with gentle care, brushed his forehead with her hand, whispered encouragement. But today she entered in tears. She took Leonard's hand, answered a call, and what she said shattered him. The pain in Leonard's chest was unbearable. The steering wheel of his Mercedes GLS had slammed into his ribcage during the impact. Shattered glass, twisted metal, the smell of gasoline mixed with blood. It all happened too fast. He had been driving to his downtown office, ready to confront his business partner, Frank, about the disappearance of $2 million from the company account. He never made it. Sirens echoed far away as Leonard drifted in and out of awareness. His body felt heavy, but his mind stayed sharp. Paramedics barked commands: gurney, trauma bay, airway, pressure. When he finally opened his eyes in the emergency department, the bright white lights blinded him. Needles, IVs, monitors, voices everywhere. Then he heard a conversation behind the curtain. Two nurses were speaking while filling out charts. "His wife already called?" one asked. "Oh, yeah," the other replied. "Didn't ask how he was. Just wanted to know how critical the condition is and whether his life insurance is active." Seriously? That cold? They had been married less than a year. Isabella Doyle, 8 months his wife. She agreed to marry him only after his family pushed him to stabilize for the children. His little ones, Matthew and Elise. 4 and 2. Leonard had lost his first wife, Helen, to a lightning-fast cancer 3 years earlier. The grief destroyed him. He could barely take care of the children. His parents kept pressing. "They need a mother. Leonard, you need to rebuild your life." And when Isabella appeared at a corporate fundraiser, beautiful, elegant, charming, Leonard thought fate had sent him a chance at normalcy. He believed her warmth was real. 8 months later, they had a modest, quiet wedding. He thought he was doing the right thing. But now, lying on that ER bed, hearing those nurses talk, a terrible suspicion began to grow inside him. The doctors eventually came in. Mild concussion, fractured ribs. Nothing fatal, but strict rest required. They planned to discharge him in 2 days so he could recover at home. That was when the idea hit him. Dangerous, risky, maybe insane. What if he pretended to be worse than he was? What if he faked a semi-conscious state at home, long enough to observe everyone around him? To learn the truth about Isabella, about Frank, about who actually cared. He called in Dr. Carter, his personal physician of 15 years, a man he completely trusted. "Doctor, I need a favor," Leonard said. A favor that will sound insane. He explained the plan. Dr. Carter hesitated, but Leonard pushed. He offered a generous payment to ensure the hospital staff kept quiet. They would all claim Leonard was conscious but extremely weak, unable to talk or respond coherently. 2 days later, Leonard returned to his mansion in Westchester. It looked the same as always, yet nothing felt familiar anymore. The private ambulance parked at the entrance. The medics carried him up to the bedroom on the 2nd floor. Isabella stayed downstairs in the living room, chatting on the phone, not even bothering to greet him. They placed Leonard on the large bed, drew the curtains, left him in dim silence. He lay perfectly still, muscles controlled, eyes half shut. Now he waited. The truth was coming, and it would be brutal. Hours later, Isabella finally entered. Her heels clicked quickly against the hardwood floor. She didn't touch him, didn't speak to him, just stared for a few seconds, sighed impatiently, and answered her ringing phone. "Hey, baby," she whispered, voice dripping with affection Leonard had never heard from her. "Baby?" "Relax, Frank," she murmured. "Everything is under control." Leonard's pulse spiked. She moved to the window, dropping her voice, but not enough. "The doctor said he'll be like this for weeks, maybe permanently." Frank, his partner, his supposed friend. "I know," she continued, "but think about it. His life insurance is $10 million. $10 million, Frank. And if he doesn't fully recover, we'll control everything. The company, the accounts, this house." Leonard's stomach twisted. Every word stabbed deeper. "He never suspected a thing," she added, laughing coldly. "The idiot was so desperate for a mother for those brats that he bought every act I put on. 8 months, Frank. 8 months of pretending I cared about those annoying kids. Matthew, Elise, his kids. Relax, baby. We'll be free. Paris, Dubai, wherever you want. No baggage, no ties." She looked at Leonard's motionless body. "No him." She ended the call and walked out without a glance back. He nearly broke the act right there. Fury, humiliation, betrayal, everything burned inside him. But the worst pain came from knowing he had handed his children over to this woman. Evening fell. Little footsteps approached. "Mommy, can I see Daddy?" Matthew's small voice trembled with hope. "I want to see him too," Elise sniffled. "No, he's sleeping," Isabella snapped. "But we just want to kiss him goodnight." I said no. "Go to your room and leave me alone." Leonard listened as their tiny footsteps retreated, followed by quiet sobbing. He couldn't move. Not yet. Hours passed. Darkness filled the room, until someone entered again, quietly, gently. It was Susan, the housekeeper. She brought a tray with water and medication. She placed it silently, then tucked his blanket, brushing his forehead the way no one else had in months. "Mr. Doyle," she whispered, voice trembling. "I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm here." She paused, wiping her eyes. "Your children need you. Please fight. Come back for them." Her tears hit the blanket. For the first time since the crash, Leonard wanted to cry too. The next days revealed an ugly pattern. Isabella rarely entered the room, only to take secret calls or check if he still seemed unconscious. But Susan was different. Every morning at exactly 7, Susan stepped quietly into the room. She opened the curtains slowly, letting in soft daylight, and brought a cup of freshly brewed coffee, even though she knew Leonard couldn't drink it on his own. She cleaned carefully, never making noise, treating the space as if it were sacred. "Good morning, Mr. Doyle," she always said in her warm, gentle voice. "The sky is beautiful today. You'd like it." Susan was 34, a tender face lined with worry, hands hardened by work. She had been in the Doyle household for 3 years, long before Isabella arrived. Leonard vaguely remembered her from before the accident. Always reserved, always efficient, someone he never paid real attention to. But now, trapped in this bed, he saw everything, every gesture, every nuance. Susan adjusted his pillows with care, smoothed the sheets, wiped his face with a warm cloth. This wasn't just housekeeping. This was genuine affection. "You're a good man," she whispered, while sorting his medications. "You always treated us with respect, always paid on time, never yelled. Not many employers do that." Leonard felt a tightness in his chest, not from the ribs this time. Gratitude, recognition, shame for never noticing her humanity before. But what truly pierced him was how she treated Matthew and Elise. The children had begun searching for her constantly. Isabella ignored them completely, shutting herself in her office or leaving for meetings, which Leonard now knew were date nights with Frank. The kids were scared, confused, abandoned, unable to understand why their father wasn't waking up. Susan stepped in without hesitation. "Aunt Susan, will Daddy get better?" Matthew asked one afternoon, trailing behind her into the room. "Of course he will, sweetheart. Your daddy is strong. He just needs time." "Can I stay with him?" "Of course. Come sit by me." She settled Matthew and Elise in the chair next to the bed. They watched their father with wide, frightened eyes. "Talk to him," Susan encouraged softly. "Even when he sleeps, he hears you. Your love helps." "Hi, Daddy," Matthew whispered. "I got a good grade in math today. My teacher said you'd be proud." "I drew you, Daddy," Elise added, holding up a wrinkled page with a stick figure smiling. Leonard wanted to pull them into his arms, wanted to shout that he heard them, that he loved them more than life itself. But he stayed frozen. Tears burned under his eyelids. Susan brushed a tear from her own cheek, watching the kids with aching tenderness. "Let's let Daddy rest now," she whispered. "How about I make that pasta you two love? The cheesy one?" The children brightened and followed her out. Susan lingered one moment longer, gently squeezing Leonard's hand. "I'll take care of them, Mr. Doyle. Don't worry. I'll look after everything until you can." She left the room. Leonard opened his eyes for a single, vulnerable second. A tear slipped down his face. Susan was an angel he never appreciated, and his children loved her in a way they would never love Isabella. The truth was becoming clearer, but the biggest shock was yet to come. Days passed. Leonard kept pretending, observing the farce his life had become. Isabella left the house earlier each day and returned later each night. New perfumes, laughter on the phone. No shame, no subtlety. Susan, meanwhile, arrived before 7 and stayed until the children fell asleep. She cooked, cleaned, comforted, played. She was a mother without the title. She stayed aboard a sinking ship when everyone else had already abandoned it. Then Thursday came. Leonard heard hurried footsteps on the staircase much earlier than usual. 6:30. The steps were quick, tense. Susan entered breathless, as if she had run. "I'm sorry, Mr. Doyle," she whispered automatically, even though he was supposedly unresponsive. "I had to come early today. I need to handle something important." She began cleaning the room quickly, nervously. Her hands trembled as she folded the blanket. She dropped a bottle of medicine. She cursed under her breath, something Leonard had never heard from her. "Sorry," she murmured again, picking it up. "I'm just not myself today." She sat in the chair beside the bed, buried her face in her hands, and broke down. Not the quiet, restrained crying of someone embarrassed. No, deep, guttural sobs of a person collapsing under impossible weight. Her phone rang. She wiped her face, inhaled shakily, and answered. "Hello." "Yes, this is she." Leonard recognized the formal tone of the voice on the other end. Male, professional. "Yes, doctor. I'm listening," she whispered, voice trembling. A long pause. Leonard watched her expression collapse. 3 months, she breathed, shattered. "Only 3 months?" Silence. Susan stood abruptly, walked to the window, covering her mouth with one shaking hand. Tears poured freely. But there's treatment, right? Something? Anything?" Another pause. Then Susan's voice trembled with a desperation Leonard had never heard from any human being. "How much?" Another pause. $280,000. Her voice cracked into a quiet, strangled sound. "Doctor, I don't have that. I'm a housekeeper. I make $2,500 a month. How am I supposed to?" She sank to her knees on the floor, clutching the phone. "My daughter is 7. 7, doctor." She can't die. Her desperation filled the room like smoke. No cheaper option, no charity program, something through Medicaid? The doctor explained. Susan shook her head slowly, as if refusing reality. A 2-year waiting list, she whispered hollowly. And she has only 3 months. Leonard felt the words like blows. Leah. Susan's little girl. He remembered her faintly. The wide smile, bright eyes, the worn school uniform she wore the day she came to pick her mother up. Cancer. 3 months. $280,000 for treatment. Thank you, doctor, Susan said, voice dead. I'll figure something out. She hung up and stayed kneeling, hugging herself, rocking gently. Then she crawled to Leonard's bedside and grabbed his limp hand with both of hers. Mr. Doyle, she sobbed. If you could hear me, if you were awake, I know you'd help. You've always been kind. Always fair. She squeezed his hand, trembling. But I can't ask. It wouldn't be right. You're suffering enough. She rose, wiped her face, forced a breath, and straightened her posture. Sorry. I'll figure something out. I always do. She left the room quietly. Leonard opened his eyes. Tears streamed freely down his still face. While Isabella plotted to steal millions, Susan begged for scraps to save her child. In that moment, Leonard Doyle knew exactly what he had to do. But not yet. Not until he collected every piece of evidence against Isabella and Frank. Strategy. Patience. Precision. The next days were torture. Susan came in with swollen eyes, forcing smiles for the kids. Leonard could see the agony beneath the mask. She called clinics during her lunch breaks, begging for payment plans, discounts, always hearing no. One afternoon, he heard her speaking in the hallway. Mom, I sold everything I could. The TV, the new fridge, Grandma's jewelry. I managed to get $23,000. I still need $257,000 more. A pause. No, Mom. I won't borrow from loan sharks. I know what happens to people who can't pay them back. Meanwhile, Isabella spent thousands on designer clothes. Delivery bags from Gucci, Prada, Louis Vuitton piled up in the foyer. She didn't even try to hide it. One morning, she entered the room mid-phone call. Frank, relax. Yes, I know the company is unstable, but soon we'll have full access to his accounts. She glanced at Leonard with disdain. He won't sign anything. He's practically a vegetable. But once he dies, or once we get a legal declaration of incapacity, it's all ours. Leonard's fingers curled beneath the blanket. The lawyer said with the right medical evaluation, we'll have full power of attorney in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Be patient, baby, she purred, laughing. Then we disappear. Leave this house, those annoying kids. Everything. She hung up, checked her makeup in her phone camera, snapped a selfie, and walked out. Leonard waited 5 minutes. Then he slowly opened his eyes, flexed his fingers, tested his muscles. He was weak, but functional. The crash had been serious, but not life-ruining. The betrayal weakened Leonard far more than the injuries ever could. He didn't just need physical recovery. He needed allies. He needed someone he could trust. He waited until evening. When Susan came in for her last check of the day, Leonard made a risky choice. She was adjusting his pillows when he rasped, voice rough from days of pretending to be mute. Susan. She froze. Slowly turned, eyes wide with shock. Mr. Doyle. Please, don't try to talk, she whispered, panicking. He forced his eyes open fully. You can't tell anyone. No one. Susan covered her mouth with her hand. Tears sprang to her eyes instantly. You're awake? You've been awake this whole time? She whispered. Since I got back from the hospital, Leonard managed. He tried to sit up. Susan rushed to help him, supporting his shoulders as he gritted through the pain. I needed to know who really cared about me, he said quietly. Now, I know. Isabella, Susan began, voice tight. She didn't know how far she should go. She's stealing from me, Leonard cut in. She and Frank are planning to have me declared incompetent. Or worse. Susan shook her head, overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do. But that's not what I want to talk about right now. Leonard reached for her hand. I want to talk about Leah. Your daughter. I heard everything. The call from the doctor. All of it. Susan flinched, trying to pull her hand away, embarrassed. Mr. Doyle, I didn't mean to burden you. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to make things worse for you. $280,000 will be in your account tomorrow, Leonard said firmly. Leah starts treatment immediately. I can't accept that. I can't, she protested, tears running down her cheeks. You saved my kids, Susan. You cared for them when their own stepmother turned her back on them. Let me save your daughter. She broke. Susan collapsed against his shoulder, sobbing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Leonard wrapped his arms around the woman who had given love without ever asking for anything in return. Now, it was time to settle the score with the people who had tried to take everything from him. And that reckoning would be merciless. Over the next 2 weeks, Leonard quietly built his case. He hired a discreet private investigator who installed hidden microphones and cameras throughout the house. He brought in a forensic accountant to dig into the company books. Every call Isabella made was recorded. Every suspicious transaction Frank processed was documented. The results were devastating. Frank had been siphoning money for 8 months, exactly since the day Isabella came into Leonard's life. Offshore accounts, shell companies. Millions slowly bled out of the business. Isabella was getting half of everything. She had never loved him, never wanted a family. She was bait, a distraction. While Leonard clung to her as a lifeline in his loneliness, they were quietly robbing him blind. But now Leonard had everything. Recordings, documents, wire transfers, hard proof. Meanwhile, Susan started Leah's treatment. Leonard oversaw everything from the background, maintaining his act for the outside world. The oncologist was cautiously optimistic. Real chances for a cure. The girl was strong, and something beautiful began to grow in the middle of all this pain. Susan started taking Matthew and Elise with her to visit Leah at the hospital. The 3 kids became inseparable. Even exhausted from chemo, Leah lit up when they walked in. Matthew brought drawings. Elise made up goofy songs to make her laugh. Will she be my sister when she gets better? Elise asked Susan one afternoon. Susan didn't answer. She just smiled weakly. Leonard, watching the videos Susan sent him so he could see how Leah's doing, felt something deep move in his chest. And then the day came. Leonard coordinated everything with Dr. Carter. Monday, 10 a.m., time for a miracle. Isabella, unusually, was at home, likely because her lawyer was supposed to come by that evening to discuss power of attorney papers. She was in the living room, murmuring into the phone with Frank, when Dr. Carter arrived for a routine checkup. I'll go upstairs and examine the patient, he announced. Sure, Isabella replied, barely looking up. In the bedroom, Dr. Carter pretended to perform an exam. Then, loud enough for anyone downstairs to hear, he exclaimed, "My God, he's responding, Mr. Doyle, can you hear me?" Leonard opened his eyes fully, sat up in bed, and said in a steady voice, "Yes, doctor. I can hear you perfectly." Chaos downstairs, footsteps thundering up the stairs. Isabella burst through the door, her face drained of color. "Leonard, you woke up." "I did," he said, staring at her with absolute coldness. "And I heard a lot while I was asleep." The blood left her face completely. "I don't know what you think you Frank's embezzlement. My life insurance. 10 million. Your calls. Every word, Isabella. Leonard swung his legs off the bed, unsteady but determined. You used me. Married me to rob me. This is insane. You're confused from the accident, she snapped, looking for control. You're not thinking clearly. Leonard opened the nightstand, pulled out a tablet, and hit play. Her own voice filled the room. He's not waking up, baby. The 10 million is ours. We're finally free. Isabella went white as paper. I have recordings of everything, Leonard said calmly. The theft, the offshore transfers, the evidence that Frank tampered with the brakes on my car. A private investigation confirmed it. He stepped toward her. You didn't just try to rob me. You tried to kill me. Leonard, I can explain. Get out of my house, he said, voice like ice. This house is mine too. We're married, she snapped desperately. With a prenup you signed. Remember? Leonard replied. In the event of cheating or criminal behavior, you get nothing. He opened the door. Security. 2 men stepped in. Professionals Leonard had hired days earlier. Escort this woman out. She has 10 minutes to collect personal items. Nothing else. You'll regret this, Isabella screamed. I'll sue you. Please do. My lawyers will enjoy themselves, Leonard said, turning away. Goodbye, Isabella. She was still screaming as they led her out. At that moment, Matthew and Elise appeared in the doorway. They had heard enough. Daddy, Matthew whispered. Leonard dropped to his knees despite the pain and opened his arms. The kids ran to him, crying. Daddy's back, he murmured, holding them tight. And he's not going anywhere. Over their heads, Leonard saw Susan standing in the hallway, tears in her eyes, a smile on her face. For the first time in a long time, something in his life felt real. The following weeks were a blur of rebuilding. Leonard filed criminal charges against Frank and Isabella. The police arrested both for attempted murder and fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. The company underwent a full audit. Financial holes were sealed. A trustworthy new partner took Frank's place. But the most important work wasn't happening in courtrooms or boardrooms. It was happening at the hospital. Leonard began going with Susan to every one of Leah's appointments. At first, she resisted, insisting he had already done too much, that he shouldn't worry. I want to be there, he said simply. If you'll let me. She did. Chemo was brutal. Leah, brave like her mother, faced each session with a strength that stunned Leonard for such a small girl. He brought Matthew and Elise whenever he could. The 3 kids played in the waiting room while Leah received her treatment. She started calling him Uncle Leo. When I get better, Leah asked one day, can I come to your house and play with Matthew and Elise? You can come whenever you want, Leonard said. And Aunt Susan, too. He glanced at Susan. She looked away, flushing. Always, he added quietly. Something subtle began to shift between them. Tiny gestures, glances that lingered half a second too long, hands that brushed when passing a cup of water, conversations that continued after the kids fell asleep. Leonard learned that Susan had been widowed 5 years earlier. Her husband died in a construction accident. She had raised Leah alone ever since, working in 3 different houses to keep up with the bills. She never complained, never played the victim. She just worked, loved, endured. You're the strongest person I know, Leonard told her one evening while they waited for Leah's scans. Susan let out a humorless laugh. I cry every day in secret. Strong is when you never cry. No, Leonard said softly. Strength is when you cry and keep going anyway. He took her hand. And you do that every single day. Susan looked down at his big hand wrapped around her own. Small, rough, tired, but for the first time in years, protected. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. For Leah. For me. For... You don't owe me thanks, he cut in gently. You saved my kids. You saved my life. That was when he realized he was falling in love. Not with beauty, not with convenience, not with the idea of filling a void, but with her essence, with the quiet strength, with the unconditional love she poured into everything she touched. Months passed. Treatment went well. Leah responded beautifully. Her hair started to grow back. Color returned to her cheeks. And the family forming between Leonard, Susan, and the 3 children began to feel natural, inevitable. Family dinners, walks in the park, movie nights on the couch, Matthew helping Leah with homework, Elise sharing her dolls, Susan cooking for everyone, while Leonard tried to help in the kitchen and mostly got in the way. You can't even fry an egg, she laughed one night. That's why I need you, he shot back, so I don't starve. Her smile faded just a little. Leonard, I'm still your employee. All of this, it feels wrong. Then don't be my employee anymore, he said. She froze, spoon in midair. What? You don't work for me anymore, Leonard said, stepping closer. You and Leah live here, with us, as family, not as staff. I can't accept charity, she protested. This isn't charity, Susan. He rested his hands gently on her shoulders. It's love. Her eyes widened. Leonard, I'm in love with you, he said simply. With your strength, with your kindness, with the way you love my kids like they're yours, with the way you reminded me what real love is. Tears slipped down her cheeks. But you're not just anything, he cut in. You're everything. He kissed her. Soft, honest, real. And she kissed him back. 6 months later, Leah's oncologist called them in for a meeting. The seriousness in the doctor's voice made both of them tense. Susan gripped Leonard's hand as they waited in the office. Whatever it is, Leonard whispered, we face it together. The door opened. Dr. Mendel walked in with a folder, sat down, and flipped through the latest results in silence. Susan's heart pounded so hard she could hear it. Then the doctor smiled. Complete remission. Susan pressed a hand to her mouth. What? Leah is cancer-free, the doctor said. The cancer is gone. Of course, we'll monitor her for the next 5 years, but everything looks excellent. Your daughter beat it. Susan broke down, sobbing. Leonard pulled her into a tight embrace, tears in his own eyes. The war was over. Leah would live. She would grow up. She would have a future. Thank you, God, Susan repeated through her sobs. Thank you. When they told Leah, the girl jumped off the chair and hugged her mother with surprising strength. I get to go back to school, Mom, and play with Matthew and Elise every day. You do, honey, Susan whispered. You do. Leonard watched them, his chest aching in the best way possible. This was his family now, not by blood or paperwork, by choice, by love. That night, after all 3 kids were asleep, Leonard asked Susan to meet him in the garden. He had prepared something special. String lights hung from the trees, a small table, a couple of simple candles. Nothing extravagant, just intimate, just right. What is all this? Susan asked, stunned. A celebration, Leonard said. Leah's healing. And us. They ate, talked, laughed, shared memories of the past, plans for the future, little stories about the kids, about life finally drifting back into place. Then Leonard stood up, took a deep breath, and went down on one knee. Susan's hands flew to her face. She was already crying before he even spoke. Susan, Leonard began, pulling a small box from his pocket. You came into my life cleaning my floors. But what you really did was clean my soul. You taught me what real love is. Not convenient love. Not lonely love. The kind of love that stays. that shows up in the worst storms, that doesn't ask for anything in return. He opened the box. Inside was a simple, elegant ring, exactly her style. My kids love you like a mother. Leah accepts me like a father. We're already a family in our hearts, Leonard said softly. But I want to make it official. He took her hand. Marry me. Let me spend the rest of my life proving you deserve every second of happiness. Susan cried so hard she could barely speak. Leonard, I never imagined a life like this. Then imagine it now, he whispered. With me. With our 3 kids. With everything we've built together. A strangled word slipped out of her. Yes. Yes. I'll marry you. Leonard slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her. Under the soft string lights of the garden, 2 hearts wounded by the past finally found healing in each other. Inside the house, 3 little faces were pressed to the window. Matthew, Elise, and Leah watched everything, beaming. Aunt Susan is going to be our real mom now, Elise asked in a hushed voice. She always was, Matthew answered, wise beyond his 7 years. And Uncle Leo, does that mean he's really my dad now? Leah asked. He always was too, Matthew said, smiling. The kids burst out into the garden, throwing their arms around the couple. Laughter, tears, and pure love filled every corner of the yard. But this story still had one last surprise, something none of them expected, something that would prove happy endings really do exist when we allow them. The wedding took place 6 months later, in an intimate ceremony in the backyard of the Westchester estate. Only close family and true friends. Nothing flashy. Just love. Susan wore a simple white dress Leonard had chosen himself. She was radiant. Matthew and Leah carried the rings. Elise scattered flower petals down the aisle, grinning from ear to ear. When the officiant asked whether Leonard Doyle would take Susan as his wife, he answered without hesitation, I do, for the rest of my life. And when he asked Susan, she looked straight into Leonard's eyes, tears streaming. I do, with all my heart. The kiss sealed more than a marriage. It sealed the union of 2 families brought together in the most unexpected way. The reception was light and joyful. The kids ran through the garden. Guests laughed. Music drifted through the warm air. Dr. Carter, the man who had kept Leonard's secret during his coma, gave a heartfelt speech about second chances and the miracles that follow courage. But the most powerful moment came when Leonard tapped his glass and called everyone's attention. I want to share something with you, he said, taking Susan's hand. When I was pretending to be unconscious, I learned lessons I'll never forget. I learned that money attracts selfish people. I learned that real love never asks, it simply gives. And I learned that family isn't blood, it's choice. He looked at the 3 kids. Matthew, Elise, Leah, you 3 are my soul. He reached into his jacket and pulled out 3 envelopes. Leah, he said gently, I've started the adoption process. If your mom and you agree, I want to be your legal father. Leah burst into tears and ran to him, hugging him so tightly he almost lost his balance. I want that, Uncle Leo. I want that so much. Then don't call me uncle anymore, Leonard said, voice shaking. Call me Dad. Dad? She repeated, testing the word, smiling through tears. My dad. Susan cried openly now, arms wrapped around all 3 children and the man who had become her husband. The family she never dared to dream of was suddenly, undeniably real. The next months were a beautiful adjustment. The once cold mansion turned warm. Laughter echoed in the halls. Crayon drawings covered walls Leonard would never dare repaint. Toys lay scattered in the living room. Dinner conversations were loud and messy. Homework was done around the kitchen table. Leonard slashed his work hours, started picking the kids up from school, showed up at Elise's recitals, cheered from the sidelines at Matthew's soccer games in the yard, and became something he had never truly been before, a fully present father. Susan, who had spent her life serving others, finally found people determined to serve her. Leonard insisted she rest, enjoy, live. They hired extra help for the house. Susan went back to school, finally chasing her old dream of becoming a teacher. 1 year after the wedding, the whole family gathered in the garden for a photo. The photographer adjusted his camera and waved them closer. Closer together, that's it. Big smiles. Leonard looked around. Susan at his side, more beautiful than ever. Matthew holding Leah's hand. Elise in her mother's arms. Not a perfect family. Patched together, built on the ruins of old tragedies. But it was theirs. And it was real. "Say love," the photographer called. "Love!" they all shouted. The flash captured the moment forever. That night, after the kids fell asleep, Leonard held Susan on the porch. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" she asked. "For saving me, for saving my kids, for teaching me that real love doesn't shout. It just stays." Susan rested her head on his shoulder. "You saved me first," she said quietly. "From despair, from loneliness. God sent you to us, or maybe He sent us to you." They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, staring at the stars. Sometimes angels wear housekeeper uniforms. Sometimes love hides in the places we never bother to look. And sometimes pretending to be unconscious reveals exactly who deserves to be in our life when we finally wake up. 5 years later, the Westchester estate looked nothing like it once had. The white, sterile walls were now covered in colorful paintings and framed drawings. The perfectly manicured garden had a swing hanging from an old tree, and a playhouse Leonard had built himself. Crooked, imperfect, but full of love. Matthew was 11, star of his school's soccer team. Elise, 9, had fallen in love with ballet and painted her mom's nails every Sunday. Leah, 12, was the most diligent of the three, dreaming of becoming a doctor so she could help kids the way doctors had helped her. Susan had earned her teaching degree and now worked at a public school, teaching children from low-income families. Leonard created a charitable foundation in honor of Helen, his first wife, to fund pediatric cancer treatments. Dozens of children had already been saved. One Saturday morning, the entire family crowded into the kitchen. Leonard tried making pancakes, burning half of them. Susan laughed and fixed his mistakes. The kids argued over which movie to watch that night. "I want an action movie," Matthew insisted. "I want a princess movie," Elise countered. "How about a comedy?" Leah suggested, ever the diplomat. The doorbell rang. Leonard went to open it, still wearing a flower-streaked apron. It was Dr. Carter, now a close family friend, holding a cake box. "Thought I'd stop by," he smiled. "Brought a chocolate cake." "Uncle Carter!" the kids shouted, racing to hug him. They all settled on the porch. Coffee stretched into late morning. They talked about everything: summer plans, school, work. Matthew wanted to go camping. Elise dreamed of Disneyland. Leah wanted to drive south and see the ocean. At some point, Susan looked around. Her husband was laughing at one of Matthew's terrible jokes. Elise was showing ballet moves to Dr. Carter. Leah was helping carry out plates and cups. It was an ordinary moment. Beautifully, breathtakingly ordinary. And it was everything. Everything she had ever wanted and never dared ask for. Leonard noticed her distant gaze and took her hand under the table, giving it a little squeeze. Susan smiled. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but they were happy tears. "It's okay," he whispered. "It's perfect," she answered. Absolutely perfect. Later that afternoon, while everyone napped after lunch, Leonard found an old notebook of Susan's. She had written in it years before, when Leah was a baby, and her husband had just died. He flipped through and stopped at one page. God, I'm asking for only 3 things: my daughter's health, a roof over our heads, and that someday, someone will truly love us. Leonard closed the notebook, moved. She had asked for so little, and God had given her everything. He found her on the porch, watching the sunset. I found your old notebook, he said softly, showing her the page. Susan read the words, and the tears finally fell. God gave me much more than I asked for, she whispered. No, Leonard said, pulling her into his arms. He gave you exactly what you always deserved. And there, holding each other as the sun dipped below the trees, 2 hearts that had survived the worst storms finally rested. Because they were home in each other.